Thanks for joining us today. How's your week been? I imagine it might look something like this, where you've been staring at a computer on Zoom all day, trying to figure out what your teacher wants you to do. One student I know, they said they had 2.5 hours worth of Zoom classes back to back with no break in the middle. Oh my goodness, I don't even know if I could do that. It might be a little bit of a struggle for you. Or you might not have quite started school yet, and you might still be in the loop trying to figure out what's going to be happening. But either way, you might have been staring at a screen for a long time, and here you are, staring at a screen yet again. Well, I don't know why. But as long as you're here, let's talk about a few things. You know, I was thinking about this concept, and someone asked me a question. It was a Jesus-related question, and this is church, so why not talk about Jesus a bit? And the Jesus question was, why do you follow Jesus? Why do you follow Jesus? You have your parents and your leaders and all these different people around you that may or may not follow Jesus, and all of them may have answers, but when it comes to your answer, what would you say? Now, you may not be a follower of Jesus, in which case, I think this is a great place to start. Because if you do believe, then great, we should have an answer to that question. If you don't believe, well, then why? Is there a roadblock? Is there a question as to what's been keeping you from trusting in Jesus? And when we start doing that, what does all of that mean? Now, when I come to answer that question myself, why do I follow Jesus? First of all, I'm a really logical guy. I don't know if you're like that. Some people tend to be more logical. Some people tend to be more emotional, but logic tends to win for me, and I think through things. And logically, it just makes sense that there is a creator of the universe. For something to come out of nothing just doesn't quite make sense to me. So you might say, well, the Big Bang or all these different things. And I'm like, okay, well, what created those things? What started them? So logically, it makes sense that all of this comes from something, or more specifically from someone, as opposed to us just magically appearing. I feel like that takes a lot more faith to believe in. And so if we do come from something, if something created us, well, that might be worth a little bit of time to think about. So at that point, the question is, well, if something or someone did create us, can we know that? Is that a person or being that we can have a relationship with? And I think that's where the core of theology comes in, which is, can you know this entity that's all-powerful, all-knowing, outside of time and space? I'll define that as God. Can we know God? And when I think logically about all these different religions, there's so much about how you have to work to appease whatever God. And yet in Christianity, there's something drastically different. And we see in Genesis, God working for humanity. And we see that it's not out of something that I can do. I can't earn salvation. I can't earn enough to be in God's good graces. But it's all about what Jesus has done and extending me an opportunity to just not reject him. And so when I think through logically that we came from something, we didn't just magically exist. And when I look at all the different religions, Christianity just makes the most sense to me. That begins to form my answer to why do I follow Jesus? Well, yes, it makes sense to me logically. Yes, it makes sense to me theologically in terms of Jesus being the only truth. But that's in my head. Then it goes down to my heart. Because when I'm encountering emotional pain. Remember, I had a lizard. I had lots of lizards growing up. You may have a pet. My first lizard died. Like, that's traumatic for a 7-year-old. Your lizard dies. And yet, my mom taught me how to pray in that. And as I got older and had more emotional pain, I felt like God was there too. And so God's there with me in the logic, but he's also there in my heart with the emotions. And I've also seen how God's been my healer. And I've seen this for many other people, where you see God healing people and taking them out of their disease. And we see God as our healer. And that's another reason why people follow Jesus. I also remember there being times where I felt like I was at the end of my rope, and it was like my logic can't go anymore. Like, I'm so stressed out. And I remember a time in college when I had no idea how I was going to get through finals and everything. And you might feel that way now, trying to figure out, how am I going to get through this year when sports don't exist and COVID, and I'm doing Zoom for 17 hours a day. And yet even at the end of my rope, God was there. Why do I follow Jesus? He's the creator of the universe. But he's not just the creator of the universe. He's the creator of the universe who wants to be involved in my life. And if that's the case, why would I not respond in worship? Why would I not respond to give him everything? Because it seems to me that life goes a whole lot better. So when you answer that question, you might have an experience, you might not have an experience. You might be trying to figure out why should you follow Jesus? But until you're able to answer that question, it's going to be hard to make your faith your own. And as I make my faith my own and try to answer that question of why I follow Jesus, there's one verse in particular that really, really has shaped me once I read it. In fact, the first time I read it, it kind of blew my mind and I fell off my chair and I was like, is that in the Bible? It's Philippians 1:27. It says, live your life in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. Let's try that again. Live your life in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. Paul is going so hard here. Live your life in a manner worthy of the gospel. And when I think of that, it's like, oh my gosh, well, if God is the creator of the universe and he created me and he put me on this earth for such a time as this, like he decided that it was worth me being in existence today, you being in existence today. If that's the case and that's the reality, live your life in a manner worthy of the gospel. Like, if that was ever an invitation to rise up and say, it's time to be who you were created to be, like, let's go and do it. Okay, I'm motivated. Great.
Do or do not. There is no try.
Let's do it. But this whole idea of worthy of the gospel, to really unpack, like, the gospel is the good news of Jesus. And that good news is that love wins. That when we see in Genesis, Adam and Eve, like, love doesn't win. Like, there's sin, there's separation from God, there's death. And death was the worst thing for us because we in our brokenness are now separated, and Jesus comes and corrects that mistake. He paid to fix it. The good news is that this correction that Jesus brings gives you and me life. That's pretty incredible to me. It gives me life. And the reason it gives me life is because he gave his life. And the reason he needed to give his life is because I am so broken. And that's a hard reality to face, to acknowledge our own brokenness. But I feel as we go through life, God brings mirrors into our story to help show us without him who we really are. God's currently using a mirror through my dog to show me who I really am. In that, hey, I've committed my life to Jesus, I'm following him, but there are times when my little dog will do things that just drive me crazy. Even last night, it was 1 a.m. and she woke me up and I was just trying to get her to go outside, go to the bathroom, and she grabbed something of mine, was running around the house, and I was like, ugh! And she looked at me as I was like having my fit of rage, getting ready to unleash, and she had the saddest look on her face, like she was scared of me, and I was this monster, and it melted my heart because I'm like, who am I? Who is in these clothes that would just like have this rage, this frustration over her running around with my sock in her mouth, like, and I felt like I'm back to the point where God reminds me he is love, and I need more of him. And this gospel allows that. This gospel takes my brokenness and it makes it whole. This gospel, live my life in a manner worthy of what Jesus has done. Take a listen to a guy who was interrupted by Jesus. He was living his life pursuing happiness, and Jesus interrupted and basically in his own way said, what do you want me to do for you? And you see how his story is transformed, and he was able to understand the depths of this question of why he follows Jesus. And so he tells his story of why he follows Jesus, and as he does that, I want to invite you to consider, why do you follow Jesus?
Things don't get rational when you feel afraid and when you feel depressed and when you feel like you're wearing a bodysuit that doesn't fit. They say that long snapping is the last true art form, but it is stressful. On field goals, I would have to snap the ball so that the ball rotates at 8 yards, that it rotates 2.5 times. When our holder catches it, the laces are pointing forward. You have to throw it into a box that's like this big. Anything that isn't that is a failure. You're either unnoticed, where you do your job perfectly, or you're the most hated person in the world because you messed up the snap. And as a guy that feels a lot, that was really, really hard. When I was born, I had the umbilical cord wrapped around my neck 3 times, cutting off oxygen. And, when you're an infant and your brain is like wet concrete, that affects you. And so they had to perform an emergency C-section to save my life. And I went on to become a very sensitive kid. I would walk into a social setting and would feel just this almost intense paralysis of fear and feeling like people were judging me or looking at me. And what's weird about that is I got voted to be the class clown when I was in high school. And so I could have these massive swings back and forth of feeling okay with who I am, and then in the same moment, absolutely hating the person that I see in the mirror because I feel so intimidated by everything around me. That sensitivity that I walked with ended up manifesting itself as an anxiety disorder and depression and ADHD. I had grown up knowing about God. I believed that God loved me. I wasn't sure if God liked me. I thought that it was based on my performance and how good I was doing that day. I always gravitated towards sports because sports made me feel like I mattered. The harder that I pursued that, the more strong I felt. And when you feel weak all the time, that's intoxicating. I remember I was in the hot tub before practice with a couple of guys, and we were just talking about winning the Super Bowl. And like, man, I keep waiting for it to sink in that we won the Super Bowl. And we all were saying that. And what I realized all of us meant by that was, I keep waiting for this thing to make me happy the way that I thought it would. And it hasn't. And now I'm actually kind of scared about that because I have made this my life pursuit and I got it. And I'm still wanting more. The thing about trauma and anxiety and depression is that if they go unmanaged, it's one of those things that it's slowly just gonna creep back in. And I found myself just kind of continually in this darker and darker and darker place of performance that felt so tedious, stressful. I was always trying to just put my mind somewhere else. I know in the past what has worked for me when I have felt this, and it's take a drink of this or smoke that. And finding myself back in that place as somebody who was public about his faith in God just created an even darker sense of failure, and I felt like a fraud. The thing about mental health stuff is that it has nothing to do with internal strength. And I think for a long time I believed that, kind of this whole testosterone culture of suck it up and you just gotta go out there and do your job and repress those feelings. But there is brain science that talks about the idea that it functions more as a disease, like cancer or diabetes. You would never tell somebody that has cancer, if you were just a little stronger, then you wouldn't be having this disease. But we kind of do that with people who are battling addiction or mental health problems. And so I'm gonna put on this mask and pretend that I have it all together. And in reality, we're all secretly dying because we all have something that we feel ashamed of. And for me, that's always been depression and anxiety and addiction. And I'm learning to try and understand the compassion that God has for me. Relationship with Jesus has been uncomfortable at times. Sometimes I feel like, are you sure you also died for me? Because I feel like I don't bring much to the table, and I don't feel worth your blood. You were perfect, and you lived a perfect life to save me from my self-destruction and like the deepest, darkest places that I would find myself in. And even in those horrible moments of darkness, that even in that, like, God still likes me. And that feels really uncomfortable. But trusting that even in the middle of that, God knew what he was getting into. It's not a surprise to him that I struggle with things or that I feel things more. The truth is that his strength is made perfect in our weakness. And letting him into that moment is scary and beautiful at the same time. Things don't get rational when you feel afraid and when you feel depressed and when you feel like you're wearing a bodysuit that doesn't fit and you look in the mirror and you don't like who you see. And these lies come in and tell us that we're not enough, that you don't matter. And when you feel like your skin is just on fire and you feel like if people really knew me, that they would hate me. I hate me. I don't like who I am. And you're finding yourself looking to all of these things to try and get just a sense of relief. It will pass. And God is with you. He's for you. In the middle of your darkest moments, God sees you and he isn't surprised by the things that you do to try to run from your pain, and that you really are worth it to him. Like, God looked at you and he said, I don't want heaven if I don't have you. I would rather come and die in their place so that I could have you. And that's his passionate, unrelenting love that he has for all of us, but that he has for you right now in this moment where you're feeling alone and broken and feeling like you're unlovable, and maybe you've been treated in a way that, you know, how could God let this happen to me? He is with us, and he promises that he'll never leave us and he'll never forsake us. And if you can just take one step at a time, just moment by moment, like down to the second, just slow it down. And so taking a moment to just be still and receive that, even when it feels uncomfortable, will bring freedom in your life. My name is Clint Gresham, and I am second.
Who can tell the sun to rise? Who can show the dawn its place? I could spend 1,000 years and only start to know your ways. Who can measure what you're worth? Who can fathom what you've done? I could write 1,000 songs and never capture heaven's love. Oh, praise the Lord, the Holy One. And oh, praise the King of perfect love. 1,000 times my soul will sing hallelujah, and I will sing 1,000 more. Who can heal the hardest heart? Who can hear the softest prayer? I could run 1,000 miles, and still I know you'd find me there. I could fall to lowly state. I could live 1,000 lives and never see the end of grace. Oh, praise the Lord, the Holy One, and oh, praise the King of perfect love. 1,000 times my soul will sing hallelujah, yet I will sing 1,000 more. I will sing 1,000 more, and I will sing 1,000 more, and I will sing 1,000 more.
Well, thanks for joining us this week as you navigate Zoom calls and class and everything you have to do. Perhaps this question, why do you follow Jesus, can get into your skin a little bit. Think about that for a few minutes and see what adventure God takes you on. See you next week.